Welcome to episode 2 of FlingGolf Theory. I'm your host, Tim Durr. In today's episode, we're going to talk through the variety of shots that you can take while playing fling golf. That's everything from your long drives all the way to your short game. We're going to talk through the sidecar, the clean sweep, the trebuchet, all of those shots. And then at the end, we have a special guest appearance from the island hopper, Jake Anderson, who's going to talk through the low to high shot with you. So stay tuned. We have a ton of information in this episode. Let's start off with some short game shots. I'm going to go through the clean sweep, the sidecar, the trebuchet, and a couple shots that are non-grounded but also work well in the short game. Let's kick it off first with my favorite short game shot, the clean sweep. So the clean sweep is a shot where the ball is back here and you take it between your legs like that. So I'll turn here so you guys can see the motion. So it's at a certain point, whatever you're comfortable with. From about 20 yards, I'm usually about 4 to 6 inches behind the back of my foot is where the ball is sitting. If I'm really going a long distance, I'm going to be way back here and really pull through on that shot. So I'll show you just a kind of traditional clean sweep motion. This is just trying to go maybe 20 yards. A couple important things to remember for the clean sweep and a lot of these grounded shots. It is not a wrist bend. You're not flicking it out. If you do that, you see it's coming out like this. That's not the approach we want. What you are doing is a shoulder lift. So you're just lifting your shoulder and you're really carrying that ball from wherever it is in your stance and lifting it toward your target. So it is this motion. For me, I like to have my right hand up here, left hand somewhere down here for support. We'll throw this one a little further. I'll show you kind of back in my stance. That one goes a lot higher and also about twice the distance of my first shot. So that is the clean sweep. Let's move to the clean sweep's cousin, the sidecar. So the clean sweep's between your legs. The sidecar is a shot that you're going to take from the side. So of course, mark where your ball is at if you're on the course. Practicing though, I'm not going to put a marker down. And then you're going to move this back in your stance, however you're comfortable with. Some people, they barely move it back at all. They kind of have a shot out here, even one-handed. There's a lot of different grips that can be used for what you're comfortable with. For me, I usually like to be a little deeper, and I kind of have my weight on this front left leg, especially if I'm trying to really go a far distance. Once again, like we said with the clean sweep, it is not a wrist bend. It is positioned, a lift. You're kind of pushing with this hand, lifting with this one to really get the ball up and out. So that one flicked out there about 20 yards. Some people, if you're doing kind of a shorter sidecar, you can kind of just have a quick little flip. But the important thing with both the clean sweep and the sidecar is going to be your angle that you start with, whether it's on the side or over top. That angle is very important because if I'm on the green, I might take a very low angle and kind of just roll it out in front of me. Or I might want to really get a high angle and throw that thing way up in the air, but go a shorter distance and have it lay down. So it is all about your angle and the depth in your stance. Two of the most important areas to remember. Once you have down the basics of the motion, of the pulling motion, it's not a wrist bend motion. Our final grounded short game shot that we're going to talk through is best utilized in the sand traps. So it is called the trebuchet because it looks like this, where you're flipping something, kind of that catapult approach. But it's best utilized, like I said, in a sand trap, usually when you have a lip or something here right in front of you. So a traditional sidecar clean sweep, you'd likely throw it into that bank of the sand trap. With a trebuchet, we don't need to do that. We can have our stick backwards, get it in position. If you're in the sand, don't touch the ball. You are allowed to ground your club. You have to keep your feet flat in the sand trap. And what you're kind of doing, I'll show an example here next to it, is just kind of tucking up into your armpit. Some people like to really get down, and that'll throw it further. Some people even do a one-handed motion. This is my motion. It's kind of two hands. Get that thing angled down so it'll scoop under the ball. And just that quick flick, threw it out there about 15, 20 yards. Safely get you out of that sand trap and put yourself in a good position to take your next shot, maybe save par or save a good chance at a decent score. Now we'll move on to some non-grounded short game shots. The first one I'm going to show you here is the channel roller or the rock and roller. So this shot has a lot of variation in how it's utilized. But one thing is, one hand will be down here somewhere on the grip. I like to have one hand kind of in this place. Let me drop the ball for a second. And I like to kind of roll it out. It's kind of a push and turn motion. But if you watch the Britain's Cup, you saw Showtime, Austin Ebersol, he has a hand up here on the channel head, and he's kind of rolling it almost like a bowling shot, kind of rolling it out there like that. So whatever you're comfortable, but the channel roll, rock and roller is a non-grounded short range shot that I like to use like this. I'm going to throw this ball out there about 15 yards. So that one, I still got some loft on it because I want to run it high. You can also take this approach, and what Austin usually does with this grasp is he's kind of going low and rolling it out there. So it's hitting the ground quicker and it's rolling toward his target. So it's usually for a nice long distance. You have a lot of green to work with. So you want to get it down quickly and let it kind of play the green towards your hole. But that's some of the variation available in a channel roll, rock and roller type shot. Now let's move on to the final non-grounded short game shot. And this is going to be the high five. So the high five is the normal kind of overhand, over the shoulder fling golf shot. But instead of getting back and really following through, what you're going to do with a high five is you're going to kind of just come to the top and let that ball hop out. So you want to kind of just go to 90 degrees and you're going to kind of stop and just let that ball jump out. So this one is good for a lot of people in that in-between range. Maybe you feel like 30 yards is your max for a sidecar or a clean sweep, and you're not really taking a full shot till, 70, 80 yards. So you're 45 yards out and you want to kind of just flick this one up there and let it pop out. Just going to do something like this. Stop midway and just throw that thing out there 30 yards, whatever you're comfortable with. But it is a very beneficial shot for that in-between range when you're grounded, sidecar, clean sweep. You're not super comfortable from that distance, but you're not needing a full shot that you step into. The high five is very useful in that scenario. We've covered our short game. Now let's get into the mid-range. And for mid-range, I'm talking shots that don't need a full run-up, but it's usually a one-step and looks something like this. So that motion for me is going to throw it 110 yards probably. Mid-range for me is usually between 70 and 150 yards. And that's probably a roughly true distance for most of the players on the World League Fling Golf New Swarm Tour. Our mid-range shots where we're kind of taking one step is in that 70, 80 yard to 150, 160. I've even played with Scantron before, and he's at 170, kind of taking a one step and whipping into it like that. So it depends on your distance. If you're a newer player, you might run into these decisions or working through this distance at 90, 100, 125 yards. But you'll get there, keep working, build up that strength, build up that distance. Stick around when we talk long shots for some good tips and techniques in there. But back to mid-range. For me, mid-range is all about the kind of angle off of my shoulder and how much I'm stepping into the shot. So if I'm going for a 70-yard shot, I'm going to set up right here over my shoulder. It's one step and kind of a casual toss to get me about 70 yards. As I get further and further, over 100, I start to get back and to the side a little bit more. So I'll square up here at the camera. 70, 100, 115, 120, and 130. 140, I'm kind of doing a shorter version of my full shot. But this is kind of how I work through in my mind, working on those angles. So it's also about your height and your release point. Very important to get that ball high in the air, because usually if you're doing a mid-range shot, it's an approach shot toward the green. So you really want to get that height. So you really want to aim high and throw that thing up toward the sky. So you're still using a lot of power to throw the ball 110 yards because you want that height on the ball. If you talk to somebody like Scantron, he'll say he's throwing basically the same power on most of his shots, but the height is more and more and more as he gets closer. So his full shot has this trajectory, but by the time he gets to a 100-yard shot, he's going straight up so that it goes real high and comes and sticks down. And that's a good mindset to have as you're gaining strength and working on different shots, is that you want to throw that ball high so it comes in and lands softly. But for me, the mid-range shot is all about working from this angle and kind of adjusting your distances, whether that be with coming off your shoulder or just throwing this harder. But that is the basics of the mid-range in fling golf. It's time for the type of shot that's everybody's favorite. It's the full range, grip it and rip it, drive off the tee, your full run-up shot. Now, there's a ton of diversity in how people take their shots. There's those with that lacrosse background that are kind of starting up here. There's those of us with that baseball, hockey background who we kind of start down here, and then we're building up that momentum to really drive through the ball. And there's a lot of different nuances in between all of that. So what I want to specifically focus on are the underlying foundation below a good fling golf shot. So I'll be referencing my own shot, but these are applicable whether you have a lacrosse background, hockey, golf, etc., and you're coming to fling golf saying, all right, how do I get more distance? How do I really get a good shot? The number one thing we're going to start with is follow through. So you already know you got to aim high and let it fly. That is the number one principle of fling golf. If you're aiming straight at your target, you're coming through down here, and that ball is just a low line drive. So to really get that height, aim high, let it fly. But next, to really get that distance, you have to follow through on your shot. So you should not be kind of coming up to the top here and stopping and trying to pull up and force the ball out. You don't want to feel like you're forcing the ball out at the top of your shot. What you want is to come through and then follow through. When I've taken my shot, my hands are crossed over like this. So I start at this motion and then follow through to this. So my body, everything is rotating. I'm following through, running that thing down to the ground. And sometimes you even hear that little finish where the club hits the ground on your follow through. That's perfectly fine. That means you're following through the whole way. You're not checking up anywhere. And these are sturdy. You don't want to bash it into the ground, but if it scrapes the grass, that's usually an indicator that you had a good follow through on a good shot. Next, let's get into how you're positioning yourself, how you're approaching your shot, and specifically how you're kind of generating your power. And that, of course, is coming from your core, it's coming from your legs, and then it comes in from the arms as well. But let's focus on the core and the legs first. With my fling golf shot, it's built off of a disc golf shot. So in disc golf, you have that step cross, that X pattern, where you're getting your momentum built up to follow through and fling that disc out. Fling golf, similar approach. See, for my full shot, step, step, cross, and then this is the most important position, because from here I'm planting and then I'm following through. So I'm getting a lot of potential energy built up here on this step. And for me, the speed that I'm doing this doesn't matter. I'm not getting extra distance if I'm running into this or if I'm taking deliberate steps. And there's a bit of debate. Some people like more speed. They feel like they're generating more power really running into it. But for me, step, step, cross, and follow through. And this is the place that you're turning the potential into that kinetic energy, into that force that is exploding through and launching that ball 170, 180, over 200 down the fairway and taking a really strong, great drive. So that's step 2, is generating that power, the plant potential. You think like a pitcher in baseball, they're planting and then they're coming through. The fling golf stick is really kind of that extension of your arm if you're a baseball player. So there's some mixed analogies in here, a lot of sports that we're pulling from, but whatever one fits your background, your experience, pull from that, pull from what you know, and figure out kind of the best way to do that and build that core strength, that potential energy that you're then unleashing through your shot. Next is that mobility, that flexibility. So you can't be tensed up like this, because then you're not going to follow through right. You're not building any of that kind of whip. That potential energy you're building up, you can help release it with that quick twitch. If you look at Scantron, our LFC 2-time champion now, who threw it 221 yards, he's a taller guy, but he isn't a ripped, built guy. What does he have? Quick twitch. He's relaxed, and those muscles are just exploding through that shot. And that is how you take all of this together. So you're picking your target, you're aiming high, you're making sure to follow through, you're taking your steps to put you in position for a good shot, and then from here to here is where that transfer's happening, and you're snapping through with your wrist to really launch that ball out. And when you follow through after that, it's a really great, complete fling golf shot. And the more you do that, the more you work these muscles that you aren't using in everyday life, and the more you build up that foundation, the better you will have, the more distance you'll have when you're taking your fling golf shot.
Greetings here from sunny San Diego. We're here at the Welk Resort, home of the 2023 San Diego Open and home to the upcoming 2024 San Diego Open. Today, we're going to talk about one of the most exciting shots in fling golf. It's called the low to high. And you're not going to be going over your shoulder. No, you're going to be taking this thing back and forward all the way to the green. Now, let's get started.
And who is been stealing the show thus far, Jake Anderson, his second shot on 9.
Now, the low to high shot is not an easy shot to master. A lot of people on the tour do not even employ it because it is very difficult and there's a lot of erratic tendencies to the shot. But let's go over some of the basics so you can at least get on the range and try it out. So, the low to high shot is going to look like your traditional golf shot. It's going to go back and forth. One of the things that you need to pay attention to is where your stick is in relation to the ground. I have a 51-inch ballistic, and this thing will hit the ground if I start off at the top. But I choke up on my stick to make sure that I can get the necessary trajectory when I'm going low to high. Now, if you have a stinger or a launch, you might not need to choke up as much, but just keep that in mind if you're using a longer stick that might hit the ground while you're going low to high. So the basic idea with this shot is that you're going to take it back and then go forward.
This is another Westerner, Jake Anderson, Island Hopper.
That's a nice one. He put it right up there, and he's going to have a great putt from there.
Now for the low to high, a lot of people tend to start practicing the shot, and when they throw it, it goes very left. Maybe even a little left, but a lot of people, when they first try it out, it goes straight left. So let's talk about one important part of the low to high, and that's your wrists. So the grip is going to look very similar to probably your normal grip that you have while you're throwing. Some people are a little bit more separated, but I tend to keep my hands close to each other while I'm doing the shot. Now, one of the things, if you look at your grip and you look at your wrists, if your stick face is going straight every time, your ball is going to go straight. But if your wrist moves from left to right, that's where your ball's going to go. If it's too much to the left, it's going to go left. If it's too much to the right, it's going to go right. So you really want to try your best to keep that front wrist, or your left-handed wrist, if you're a righty, keep it very straight so you can just kind of come back and forth the entire way.
He used a low to high technique on his third shot for another Reggie.
Now that we have the basic idea of how the shot works and we know what to do with our grip, let's go over the full swing now. I'm going to take a ball, and all I'm going to do is go back a little bit and then accelerate forward on my high approach. So here we go. Don't forget to take one step. That helps you adjust yourself moving forward. Let's see that shot again, but from a different angle. Now I'm going to do the same thing. Little bit back and then accelerate forward while taking my step. Now we've seen the low to high in action and from different angles. And you might notice a couple of things. When I bring the low to high back, I'm not just simply bringing it back vertically. I'm bringing it back a little bit to the side so the ball doesn't come out of the cradle. If I just came straight back, that ball wouldn't go anywhere. But I want to keep it inside of the channel the entire time and then just throw it forward. So cradling it back, forward. One smooth swing. That's all you need for the low to high, and a lot of confidence.
On the third playoff hole, Jake continued his pinpoint accuracy with another Reggie.
So Jake, what about your wrist placement?
It's a good question. So when your wrists are going back, you're going to want to cradle the ball. That's what I do. I cradle the ball on the way back, so you're actually going to see it from the side. But as it's moving forward, the stick is going to go straight, and the channel is going to basically launch the ball towards the hole. So you want to keep that channel as straight as possible. So let's look at another one. Right on the green, getting ready for another birdie opportunity. And that's what you want to see with your low to high. You want to plop it. You don't want to see much roll out of it because you're not using too much force to push it forward. You're making it go all the way up in the air and drop right on the green for hopefully a great birdie or even eagle opportunity.
When should I use a low to high?
Well, the low to high for me is a good 80 yard to 130 yard shot. For a normal low to high, I might just take one step. But for a further low to high, I might actually start a little further back and bring it back as I'm taking my steps and I launch it forward. I don't need to do it on any of these holes because this is a bit of a shorter course, but I might need to do it for those 130 yard shots, maybe even a little bit further. But something to keep in mind, when you're putting a little more strength into it, you might have a bit more curve to your shot. So try it out a couple different times before you try it out in the tournament. And that's the low to high, one of the most exciting shots on the FlingGolf Tour. Back to you, Tim.
Thanks, Jake. That is a shot that I have not mastered by any means, so I wanted to bring in somebody who was great with it to really show you the nuances, and I even learned quite a few things myself when checking out Jake's tutorial there on the low to high. And something else that I think I want to mention as we close this video, there are still a ton of opportunities for new FlingGolf shots out there. There are even some that currently exist today that I didn't cover in this video because they're newer shots or they're shots I haven't really experienced or done a lot. So I'll let somebody else really be the expert on those shots.